Leave a comment where you are watching in the world. If you love true crime, check out our new page in the description below. Thank you. We met up from Tinder to get some ice cream at a mom and pop ice cream parlor that was walking distance from her apartment. The date was okay. A little awkward. I'm a pretty outgoing guy, especially on dates, but she was really quiet and didn't laugh at any of my stories or jokes. Maybe they didn't land, or maybe she just didn't find me funny, which is fine. My humor isn't for everyone. But she was just standoffish immediately. Her behavior reminded me of meeting up with a girlfriend that was trying to decide how to break up with you throughout the date. She didn't show any typical uninterested behavior, sighs, eye-rolling, texting during date, etc. She wasn't like this over text at all. Her texts were full of smiley faces, flirty, and she even sent me genuinely funny Snapchats. She also didn't look as good as her pictures or Snapchats. I wasn't catfished, necessarily, because you can tell that this girl was the same person in her pictures, but everything was just kind of off physically. It was almost as if she was that two-faced girl from that episode of Seinfeld, and she was just in that terrible lighting the entire date, best way I could explain it. Wasn't the lighting's fault, she just looked off. When the date was over, I was planning on walking to her car, hugging her goodnight, and then just never talking to her again. But when I asked her where her car was parked, she said she had walked to the shop from her apartment. This set off red flags immediately, because she was the one who set up the location of the date. She picked where we were supposed to meet up. She asked for my crossroads and told me that she'd pick a location halfway between us. I live 15 miles from the location, so she purposely chose something really out of the way for me, so that she could walk to the date. This felt really weird to me, but I assumed maybe she got the crossroads wrong and just gave her a hug and said goodbye. As I was leaving, she followed behind me and asked me to walk her home since she didn't live far and was afraid of the dark. I wanted to say no, but it was dark out and I didn't see much light where she'd be walking, so I just clutched my pepper spray in my pocket close and prepared for the worst. We made awkward small talk on the short walk there and hugged her goodbye again, where she walked into the complex and disappeared. I drove home and got a text from her that read, "Hey, sorry about tonight. I know it wasn't what you expected, and I just wanted to say sorry for acting so weird all night." Apparently, the reason why she was so strange was because she was scared of me the whole night. Her last Tinder date had sexually assaulted her, and she was really nervous the entire date that I was going to hurt her. She thought she was emotionally ready the day leading up to the date, so she didn't cancel. When she realized that nothing bad was going to happen, she asked me to walk her to her car, which was parked at a nearby apartment complex. Because she was scared of the dark, she parked there because she wanted me to think she lived close by in case I tried following her home or something, where she waited until she watched me walk away. I understood and felt bad for her, but decided to still not continue seeing her. I recently had a date that I thought was the best of my life end up being the worst of my life. Met a girl on OkCupid. We start talking on a Sunday. We chat a bit, exchanging messages on the site. We're both very nerdy and love games. She plays MMOs and GMs D&D, and does Friday night magic. Fucking perfect. And she doesn't look too bad. In fact, she's probably the most attractive girl that has ever talked to me on that site. She gives me her phone number, and we text for an hour about more nerdy shit. Then she informs me that her phone is dying, and she doesn't have her charger, and that her phone plan runs out that night. So she gives me her Facebook and says she can get Wi-Fi on her phone still, and talk to me there. We spend about 7 hours chatting on Facebook until 4 a.m. Since it was Sunday, I took about an hour break to watch True Blood. She apparently likes True Blood, says she's Sookie in real life. Why are you Sookie? Because I'm sort of telepathic and I can read people and feel their emotions and thoughts. Ahu, red flag 1. She asks if she can come over and watch True Blood with me. My roommates, friends, and I had just spent the entire weekend having a LAN party. My 2 roommates and I were still set up in the living room for the LAN, and none of us had felt like being productive members of society that day, so none of us had showered. I tell her this thinking she probably would not want to hang with a bunch of smelly dudes. I have an acquired taste for nerd funk. In fact, I cannot take a shower, so I'll fit in with y'all. Red flag 2. I tell her I'm not really comfortable with that. I mean, we had just started talking that day and never met. So I go watch the show, then we chat more for the rest of the night. In our chats, she seemed really excited and a bit obsessed about the fact that if she came over to hang out with me and my roommates, she was going to make them jealous of me. Red flag 3. When I come over all tits and ass and covered in tattoos and 110 pounds size 0, and all suicide girled out they're gonna get so jealous it will be fun. My roommates and I homebrew beer and mead, and we drink a lot of craft beer. We're beer snobs. I ask if she drinks, and she says that she used to, but doesn't anymore. She only drinks at home, never with a group of males, and only when she can watch her beer, and never take her eyes off it after the factory seal has been broken. Then she says she thinks she can talk to her therapist, red flag 4, and be able to drink if she hangs out with me, because it sounds like fun to her. At this point, she also makes some comment about having PTSD. Red flag 5. I got the impression that she had been raped in the past from someone spiking her drink, but I never asked her about it and moved on. Doesn't matter to me if that did happen to her or not. It's not something I'd ever even think of doing, and I'll never treat a gal like she's damaged goods, or something because of her past. She then makes a comment about drinking homebrew, making her nervous. That's fine. You don't have to drink. My friends and I have abstained from alcohol in the past when having someone over who has serious problems with it. Then out of nowhere she accuses me of being an angry, alcoholic drunk who might hit her. Since her ex-husband started out 2 beers a night and then beat her, and her alcoholic mother abused her. Red flags 6, 7, and 8. Somehow during our conversation about her wanting to make my roommates and friends jealous about her, she makes the comment, I wreck guys, I've done porn. Red flag 9. Proceeds to tell me all about how she models for some suicide girls website. She did 3 scenes for Naughty America that were never released because I had a good lawyer and they broke contract, so I had them all taken down so no one has ever seen them. Oh, and I fucking love anal. Well, that's nice, but that's not something you say to someone the first time you're chatting with them and haven't even met with yet. Red flag 10. At this point I was halfway convinced this person was a troll and couldn't be real. The next day she chats with me on Facebook more throughout the day while I'm at the office for work. She starts talking to me about drugs. She kind of hinted that she had tried a lot of things, then tells me that I never do any of the hard stuff, just weed and shrooms for me. Red flag 11. I share my opinion on drugs, mainly that I don't do them ever, but that I don't have that much of a problem with people who do, and many of my friends have tried things in the past. I've even been a trip sitter on occasion. She thinks that hanging out with those kinds of people is really dumb, and she thinks less of me for that. But it's perfectly fine that she's tried heroin, meth, cocaine, acid, and regularly does shrooms and smokes weed. Red flag 12. She tells me that she has a list of things the next guy she dates must have or do, which includes smoke weed every day. She claims she will peer pressure me into it with research studies that only she has access to. Red flag 13. We argue a bit about why she thinks I need to do drugs, why it's okay for her to have tried things but not my friends, and she ends up going into some freak-out mode where she claims she's having terrible anxiety and I need to stop talking to her right now. Red flag 14. A few hours later she starts talking to me again, says that the things we were talking about were triggering her PTSD and making her anxious, but she's cool now and wants to chat more. Informs me that she really likes me and that up until our disagreement on illicit substances and the way that her anxiety attack changed my impression of you and the way I think of you, that she would have let me wear her like a hat. Red flag 15. We continue to chat. She seems to have gotten over whatever was going on with her and says she doesn't want to sound clingy, but she just has to see me right now / that day. She wants to bring a late lunch to my work at around 4 p.m. Hell no. Red flag 16. Eventually I agree to do something with her and meet her that night. I was really wanting to go see Guardians of the Galaxy, so I asked if she wanted to go see that. She did, so I bought tickets for a 9:30 p.m. showtime. She wants to meet me at 7 p.m. so I can get to know you. We won't be talking and learning about each other during the movie. She wants me to meet her at 7 sharp at the mall in a nerdy / geeky toy shop kind of place. I get there, am completely surprised that she looks just like her pics. She's a little nerdy pixie dream girl with a lot of tattoos. She was talking with the only employee at the store when I walked in, turns her back on him mid-sentence to greet me, and starts walking around the store looking at stuff with me. She complains that the guy working there had been hitting on her, and she was so glad I showed up on time. Apparently people hit on her all the time in public. Red flag 17. We look at everything in the store. She's possibly even more nerdy than I am, and a total fangirl for everything. She also asks repeatedly if I will buy little things for her in the shop. Red flag 18. We start walking around the mall. Almost instantly she starts putting her arm around mine, leaning on me, hanging on my shoulder, holding my hand. This was a bit strange to me since we'd just met, but whatever, she's cute and she's affectionate and normally gals don't treat me like that. We go to a bunch of girly/hippie type of stores and popular places. She's constantly asking if I will buy this so adorable/so cute/awesome thing that she wants in every store. Red flag 19. In one store, she strikes up a conversation with the gal working behind the cash register and ends up exchanging numbers with her because she's new to the area and wanting to meet new friends. During this exchange, she calls me her boyfriend and hugs me. Weird. Red flag 20. In one store, one of the girls working there walks by and asks if we need any help. We tell her we're fine and just looking, then we immediately leave. Once we're out of the store, she tells me she almost decked that employee because when she came up to ask if we needed help, the girl had given us a look. It was like she felt sorry for me and was saying, "Sorry honey, I wish you didn't have to be with that guy." WTF? I would have hit her, but I don't need another assault charge. Red flag 21. We still have a good hour and a half until the movie starts, so she suggests we get in her car and drive to her favorite spot. Her car is filthy and covered in trash on the inside. It was honestly as if someone had been living in the car. Red flag 22. We drive to a nearby lake. On the way there, she points out a neighborhood of houses and says, "That's where I live." Before we had met up that night, I had asked what part of town she lived in to figure out which theater we should go to, ask if she wanted me to pick her up or meet her there, etc. She had told me she lived in an apartment complex on the opposite side of the lake from where she pointed out the houses she lived in. Red flag 23. Her spot at the lake was a small park. We sat on a bench, held hands, and talked for a long time. While there, she tells me about how she was the innocent, designated driver, techie girl who didn't do anything at parties and was bilingual. Somehow that made her a prime candidate for some guy to woo in order to recruit her to do tech work for the MS-13 gang. She showed me a small infinity symbol tattoo on her foot and claimed it was a MS-13 property mark. She claimed she had not even known what she was doing for 4 years before she got out of that life. Red flag 24. She told me her father was Irish and her mother was half Persian and half black. Somehow this made her Hispanic. She claimed she grew up in Cali and Spanish was her first language, and the only reason she looked white right now was that she hadn't been working the fields and getting a tan. Red flag 25. She told me what college her mother worked at, so later I Googled and found a pic of her mom. White as white can be. Red flag 26. She told me she had not spoken to her parents in over 5 years. 30 minutes later, she tells me that she went to see them just a few weeks ago to hang out with her dog that lives with them and visit. Red flag 27. We go to a Target and walk around looking at stuff to kill time. She asks me if I will buy her more random shit at the store. On the way back to the mall, she makes several comments about how she really likes me, and she thinks I'm adorable and cute and the perfect guy for her. I'm her ideal guy, etc. She says, "You are so adorable. I want to hug you / I want to kiss your face / I want to fuck you," repeatedly. This was all surprising to me, but whatever. Chick maybe wants to bang me and is showering me with affection. I'll roll with it. We go to the movie, share a drink, talk a lot more since we were 30 minutes early, and there was no one in the theater but a couple in the back row and us sitting in the front row. At this point, she pulls her pants and her panties down to show me a tattoo she really wanted me to see that was way below her panty line. Who does that on a first date? Red flag 28. We spend the entire movie holding hands, her placing my hand really far up her thigh repeatedly, her leaning on me the entire time, and randomly biting my hand or my shoulder in a playful way. Movie was pretty fucking great, BTW. We both nerded out and loved it. I made the smart move of parking my car next to the theater. Her car was parked on the opposite side of the mall. After the movie, I offered to drive her back to her car. "Sorry, no, I never get in anyone else's car. But I'd love it if you'd walk me back to my car, and then I can drive you to yours." We walked through the mall at about midnight, completely deserted, holding hands the entire time and talking about random things. At one point she mentions that while she was still with the gang, she was forced to shoot a man. Few hours before she had told me she had never held a gun before. Red flag 29. While we're walking to her car, she starts telling me stories about how she used to be really big into shoplifting at this mall and all over the city with an old ex of hers, and that they would steal everything. Red flag 30. She drives me back to my car, tells me she had an incredible time, but she needs to go to the other side of the city now to do her laundry at a friend's place since her apartment doesn't have a dryer or washer. It's about 12:15 at night. Red flag 31. I I give her a hug goodnight. She turns it into a kiss, then tells me, "Now get the hell out of my car," and giggles. Best date ever? If a bit weird. Turns out to be worst date ever. The aftermath. Later that night, about 1:30 a.m., she messages me online to say that she needs my help because someone doozed her PC. She claims her ex-husband is a member of Kirasek or some 4chan hacker group or something, and he's done this, but she needs my help to prove it so she can call the cops on him. Oh, and her bank account has been drained. Red flag 32. But she thinks the bank account has nothing to do with her ex. She thinks that's her dad. She has a joint bank account with her father, and she thinks that he drained it of money in retaliation because she won't release her mental health records to him. Red flag 33. I tell her I can't help her. A few minutes later, she says she has it taken care of and will be pressing charges on her ex. The next day, she chats with me online more. I had gone into the night before not thinking it was a date, but then she turned it into one and confirmed it was indeed a date. She said she had an incredible time and she loved my personality and couldn't wait to do more stuff with me. More dates. Come over for my group's RPG day. Come over for my group's board game/card game night. Come over to watch series like Got and True Blood, hang out, etc. She also makes a lot of comments about how she cares about hearts, not parts, and thinks I am so attractive and hot. We talk on and off throughout the day until she goes to see her therapist in the afternoon, and then she had plans with other friends that night. The next morning I log onto OkCupid and notice her account has been deleted. She messages me after a while to give me her new phone number. Asks some innocent things like, "What are you up to?" "I'm going to lunch." "Me too." "What are you having for lunch?" "I don't know yet. What about you?" She takes a while to respond, then says, "We just had Taco Bell." "I have to tell you I met someone last night. I'm seeing them now. We can't go on any more dates." She apparently met a guy that night who she had not seen nor spoken to since high school 5 years ago. It sounded as if she had a crush on him in high school when she weighed 240 pounds, and he wouldn't give her the time of day, but now that she weighs 100 pounds he's interested. In a single night they go from, "Oh hey old high school friend, I haven't even spoken to in 5 years," to "We're official." She spent the night at his place, probably fucked him, after telling me repeatedly that she had a rule of, "If I sleep with you within the first 3 dates, I'll be bored of you within 3 weeks. Red flag hashtag, I don't even know anymore. We barely talked the rest of the day. Next day I find out that she is moving in with the guy, after a single day of knowing him/going out with him. And this is after she had told me that she had her apartment paid for like 6 months in advance. She also said contradictory things about having roommates at her apartment. First she had a girl roommate. Then it was a guy roommate who she had permanently friend-zoned. Then it was 3 different roommates. Then it was, "I hardly ever stay at my apartment because MS-13 will come to kill me and my family someday, so I never stay in the same place every night." Pretty much every single day that I had been talking to her, she had crashed at a friend's house and slept in her clothes that night, since she posted pics about it on Facebook the next morning every day. At this point I was ready to heed the advice of my friends and delete her Facebook, delete her number, and never speak to her again. I told her so and asked if there was any reason why I shouldn't after the way she had treated me. She maintained that she had done nothing wrong. We argue a bit, she deletes me from Facebook. Later that day I get a million text messages from her, and she tries to call my cell while I'm at work. She claims that 2 messages I sent her on Facebook and 3 texts I sent her, all basically saying I have no idea why you treated me this way or did this to me. I'm confused, I don't understand. I'm done talking to you unless you want to talk to me again and have a good explanation. Or harassment. She claims she is going to her lawyer in less than an hour to file VOPS for harassment on me and 3 other guys she had been talking to/seeing who flipped shit when I got with someone other than them. She then says she's going to also file charges against me for slander because she did nothing wrong to me at all, and I obviously must have told lies about her to my friends in order for them to suggest I delete her crazy ass on FB and her number. She says I have exactly 1 hour to provide proof that she did anything with malicious intent towards me, or she's filing these charges. Red flag, what the fuck? Consensus of my friends and I is that this girl was most likely homeless, a compulsive liar, was desperately looking to get laid and find a guy to take her in and take care of her, and was on a lot of drugs. They also said I don't have any game, otherwise I would have slept with her on the date night, but silver lining, I avoided sticking my dick in crazy. I went on a roller coaster of a date with a French guy in Paris. It was summer, and we were meeting on the steps of Sacred Cur. We arrive and he brought red wine, and I made a comment jokingly saying, "Oh, you got red in summer." And he responded with, "Oh, I guess I'm a piece of shit for getting the wrong wine," which immediately made me think I have made a dire mistake. I reassured him and told him I was just teasing, but that was red flag number one. During our convo, he kept complimenting me incessantly, like to the point where it's uncomfortable. After like 10 compliments, you don't even know what to say anymore. Like at one point I was telling him a story, and he kept interrupting me to say, "Your eyes are so beautiful I can't stop staring at them." And I was like, "Thank you, that is so nice. Okay, back to my story." Like it was non-stop. At one point after the 19th compliment, and my gracious thanks, I heard him mumble in French. "And I'm waiting for you to say the same to me." And I was like, "What was what?" And he goes, "Oh, nothing." He didn't think I spoke French, but I am fluent. So that was uncomfortable, shoving compliments at me and pouting when I didn't give him one back. Like, "Sir, if I wanted to compliment you, I would. I love complimenting people." But I wasn't overly attracted to him, and also who TF says that. Red flag number 2. He asks me if I've been on many Bumble dates, to which I said yes, many. I've been single for a while, and I go on dates often. He didn't like this. He began asking me why I haven't settled down with any of them, and I explained that I've met lots of really great guys, but it just hasn't clicked yet. He then got weirdly quiet for a few minutes, and then said, "You know, not everyone is going to be as perfect as you. Life isn't a fairy tale. You have to give people chances, you know." Okay, so now I realize I am seated next to a French incel, or one in the making. Awesome. I reply and tell him that yes, I obviously know that. I don't think I'm perfect or better than anyone. I hadn't settled down because there hasn't been a strong connection thus far. Not because I am not giving these guys chances. That dating is a two-person thing, and sometimes the guy doesn't want to meet again also. And that yes, I know life isn't a fairy tale. TF? Red flag 3. At one point on the steps he's asking me where I live, and I say, "Oh, just down there like 2 streets down." And he starts asking me where specifically, like is insisting I tell him which street. Jesus Christ. Oh, and there were a lot more self-deprecating sentences like, "Oh, just shit," sprinkled throughout. So at this point I'm trying to get out of here as soon as possible. We finish the wine and walk up the steps to the top, and am planning my exit. We get to the top, and he turns to me as I'm about to leave, and he looks at me and goes, "You have to give me another chance." And say, "Listen, thank you for the wine, but I am not going to see you again, I'm sorry." He gets very upset. His eyes get huge, and he starts yelling, "I did my studies, I have a CDI, you must give me a second chance." In France, a CDI is a permanent contract, and it's a big deal because you can't be fired, but like every person I know has a CDI. And since when does having a permanent contract equate to women owing you something? By now people are starting to look at us. I am calmly telling him that no, I don't think so, when he grabs my arm and keeps going on about his CDI. But people are looking, so he lets go, and I say to him that this is not fun, I am not enjoying this, and I don't have to do anything. He has a moment where I think he's about to hit me, and I can see his eyes thinking, and trying to figure out how to keep me here without causing a scene. And I take my chance and run down the stairs as fast as I can. And I am obviously terrified, because he knows the general area where I live. Thankfully he didn't follow me, likely because of the crowd of people who started watching us. Never blocked someone so fast in my life. He and I had began casually chatting through social media. I had remembered his face from the high school we had gone to. He was a year older than I, and during our high school years had been one of the guys that all the girls had gushed over in high school. I guess I felt flattered that he would speak to me after high school, after a few years. We had never spoken until a few years after high school, but during the time we had talked online, he seemed really nice and friendly. After talking online for a few days, he invited me out on his boat, which I agreed to. I figured why not. As soon as we get on the boat, he was just acting weird, just really overly flirty. Eventually he rammed his tongue down my throat, which was gross. I'm not sure why I kissed him back or didn't ask him to take me home. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess. On the way back to my house, he kept glancing at me trying to be seductive and saying things like, "You have no idea what I would do to you," and how good he thought I looked sitting there. He kept asking if he could go to my room, and we could hang out and watching a movie on my bed. I turned that offer down countless times. Later that night, my best friend and I were going to go dancing/drinking at a club. I can't remember how said guy was invited, but he ended up coming with us. We took my best friend's car, so it was just the 3 of us. I ended up drinking a lot of tequila that night. I didn't mean to get that drunk, but I did, enough to say a few sexually flirtatious things toward him. After the three of us left the club, I was still pretty trashed, but I laid down in the back seat of the car while he, the only sober one, drove my best friend and I back home. My best friend lived on the street behind me at the time, so he had parked his car at my best friend's house before we had originally left to go to the club. He dropped my best friend off and he helped me into his car. I noticed he had put the car doors on child lock. This is where things took a creepy turn. He started the car and kept saying how we were going to get a hotel together. I remember everything being really blurry, but I kept repeating the words no over and over again. He got mad and punched the steering wheel as he said, "Oh, come on. It's not like I'm going to do anything to you. And you're going to that hotel with me." I knew I had to think quick on my feet, so I agreed to go to the hotel with him only if he would stop at my house on the next street over, so I could get a change of clothes. He did, thankfully. As soon as the car doors were unlocked, I had never jumped out of a car so fast. He ended up begging me to let him stay at my house for the night, claiming that his grandparents, who he resided with at the time, had locked him out at the time of the night. I caved. I let him sleep in the guest bedroom. I locked my bedroom door and fell asleep. It was maybe around 3 a.m., and I woke up to what sounded like his shaking my door handle roughly, and he kept repeating my name. I was scared, so I just laid there and didn't move. I heard him walking back to the bedroom and the door close. The next day he said he was going to go home. He winked at me before leaving, and I never saw the guy again. Honestly, it was the weirdest and creepiest date of my life. Met a guy off a dating app at a restaurant. He looked nothing like his picture, but fine, I'm not rude. He ordered Diet Dr. Pepper with his meal, and drank the first one in 30 seconds or so, and started snapping at the waitress for more. I swear he drank 15 to 25 cups at least during this awful meal. I've never seen anything like it, and I was really uncomfortable and grossed out. He kept bringing up meeting his kids because they need a stepmom, and his mother because he's close to her, and she was going to really love having me. He practically licked his plate clean, and I was so uneasy, I couldn't eat, so he got a to-go box for my food. But for himself, I keep thinking gluttony, who drinks like that. No manners at all either. He called his mom during to let her know he found the one. I was barely even talking, because his behavior was so gross, and then he didn't leave a tip. I went back and put a tip, and I took my time hoping he would just leave, but no, he was waiting. We went outside, and I was a little scared to walk to my car because of the conversation, and him saying his kids would love me as a stepmom, and other nonsense. I told him thanks, and bye, and he asked for a hug. I said I am not comfortable giving hugs to people at all, even ones I know well, so no. He then asks for a kiss. Now WTF? If I don't hug you, why TF would I kiss you? Seriously? I said no way. He then got closer, and was saying please, please. I stepped back, and said no thanks, seriously no. I decided to just walk to my car, and drive to a store in case he followed me. He followed me to my car, and was still asking for a kiss. I got in and locked the doors, and drove off fast, hoping he didn't have time to follow me. I swear he teleported in his car because he was right behind me. He didn't obviously, he just happened to be parked a car away. I did drive around aimlessly for a while, then go to Target, because I was really afraid to drive straight home. It was crazy. Then he started texting me. I was trying to be nice, especially since it was the first date I'd gone on in years, and I thought maybe this is normal behavior. Maybe I'm being weird. He sent me photos of his kids in fancy clothes, saying they just bought new wedding outfits. He sent me pictures of him cooking chicken and of a pool, and told me I was to come spend the weekend swimming and eating at his place. He said he told his mom about me, and she can't wait to meet me. I blocked his number LOL. Then he started messaging me through the dating app, and I deleted the app. Scared me honestly, and I didn't go on another date for a couple years. The way he was dressed really bothered me too, which I know is stupid, but he was wearing a pink polo with jean shorts and black dress shoes, with white socks pulled up to his knees. The whole thing was kinda scary, kinda embarrassing. Sorry I didn't know which part of what he said was the worst, so I just shortened it as much as I could. I was at a good-sized house party in college, and the host introduced me to his lab mate shortly after I got there. We got to talking while things were warming up. No one was tanked yet, and people were still arriving. Eventually the lab mate asked me for my number. He was okay looking, seemed a little dull but harmless, and I agreed. We barely knew each other, but why not? It's college. You meet people and have a series of terrible and meaningless relationships. He disappeared shortly after. I didn't think much of it because the house was decent sized and figured he wandered off. The party ended around 3 when we were out of booze. The next morning around 8:30 a.m. I got a call. Barely conscious, maybe still a bit drunk, I answered like an idiot. It was him. He asked me out for a nice steak dinner and church that evening. To get him off of the phone as quickly as possible, so I could go back to sleep, I agreed to whatever he was asking without really understanding the question, and awoke around noon with no real memory of the conversation. He called me a few hours later asking me for my address, so he could pick me up. Memories came flooding back. I gave it to him, hastily showered, put on makeup and a nice outfit, regretting agreeing to this but looking forward to the steak, and went down to my apartment's garage to meet him. He was dressed short of schlubby, but I figured that's a grad student for you. I didn't think a nice place would really turn us away. As he drove, he proceeded to flip through dozens of songs, mostly Elvis, never letting one finish, sometimes starting from the beginning of the same song several times in a row. I heard the first minute of You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog more time than I care to admit that night. He then revealed to me he didn't like music and everything on his iPod was from his dad borrowing it for a road trip. It was a 64 gigabytes, big for the time and expensive, with around 100 songs on it. Utterly bizarre and distracting. It also turned out he didn't really like anything, couldn't name a book he'd read since high school or even one he enjoyed, didn't watch TV but was lurking while his roommates were watching Fawlty Towers but didn't understand the humor, didn't have a favorite movie. His reply was, I like everything. When I asked and said he liked Titanic, didn't play video games. Didn't know Harry Potter was a book series before a movie. Favorite food was Taco Bell. What had I gotten into? We were heading to a nice part of town, past a couple of nice restaurants, and I eagerly ask him where we're going to end up. He replies with a vague, oh, you'll see. To keep the conversation going, I asked where he disappeared to last night. He said he left because his bedtime is at 10:30 p.m. sharp every night. I asked if that's why he'd called me so early. He seemed surprised and thought he'd given me time for sleeping in. Holy shit. My apprehension grew. He then turned suddenly into a Denny's parking lot. We go in. Shit. I'm way overdressed. We're seated. I figured I was promised steak. I'm getting one even if it's nastiest, most gristly slab of beef in the city. He turns to me and eagerly asks if I'm okay with splitting. I was tempted to buy us each our own damn steak, but to be polite and to not embarrass him I agreed, resolving to eat a proper dinner at home. The steak came, we split. I tried to not feel the judgmental eyes of the staff on me and proceeded to church. It was a Saturday night young adult service with contemporary music, and was supposed to be some sort of place for the non-secular devout to hang out on Saturday nights instead of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I guess. Whatever the heathens do. Free coffee and stale donuts. During the singing, large group of people would jump up onto the pews and furiously bounce along to the music, belting out the lyrics. He was smiling, clapping his hands along to the music, and interjected with him waving his arms in the air. I was dying a little and couldn't wait to leave. They had a, thankfully, short service on keeping yourself pure, and my horror grew to the point I think I could power a small city with it. He was nodding along vigorously with the pastor, with the occasional and other grunts of agreement. Did he bring me here to convert me from my sinful ways? Damn. The evening could have gone so much worse, but thankfully he didn't ask me what I thought of the service, or maybe he was astute enough to detect my ire. He took me home without incident. My roommates piled on me asking how it was, and well, I told them the same thing I'm telling here. I'm walking down the street, just finishing a conversation on my old-ass, craptastic flip phone. Just as I'm hanging up, wham, I know into someone and drop my phone. I apologize, grab my phone, and head back to work. 10 minutes later, I get a phone call. Hey, I think we switched phones by accident. Turns out the girl I bumped into had the same phone as me. Anyways, we plan to meet at a local coffee place after work that day to trade back. I walk up and see this very cute ginger wearing a suit dress. We chat for a bit. Turns out she works at a bank, likes what I like, and is totally up for getting dinner this weekend. Great. Saturday evening rolls around, and I swing by her place to pick her up. Out her door walks a girl who looks remarkably like said date, only instead of professional office clothes. She is wearing 4-inch platform hoe boots, fishnet stockings, some sort of corset like top, and in spiky hair. Now normally I don't really care about a person's style, but I was a bit taken aback. Who cares, I think, and jump out to open the door. Cue witty banter. Everything is going great. She's laughing at my jokes, and her humor seems to match mine perfectly. She asks what the plan is for the night, and I tell her I'm going to take her to my absolute favorite high-quality dining establishment and get her a Big Mac. Hell, if she plays her cards right, I might even supersize it. She runs with the joke, and even one-ups me. My spirits are high. She might have wild fashion, but this chick is cool. We arrive at this nice pub in town, and I turn off the car. What about McDonald's? Legit confused look on her face. I laugh, and upon seeing her face stop in confusion, we head inside and order dinner. I have a scotch, and she orders the biggest boot. This restaurant has glass boots, of Bud Light I've ever seen. The waiter comes over and takes our order. As he's leaving, my date whispers rather loudly, "I can't believe they let his people in such a classy place. We should probably check our food for spit before we eat it." Our waiter is black and has ears, so I am beginning to panic. She continues her whispered commentary on the supremacy of whites, all the while putting away an obscene, but impressive quantity of beer. Dinner arrives, and she makes a point of checking her plate for saliva. Waiter and I make eye contact, and I like to think that he understood that I agreed with him that this girl was nuts. So 3 more boots of beer later, she excuses herself for a bathroom break while I take care of the check. I apologize profusely to the waiter for my date's conduct. Dude is a true gentleman. Don't worry about it, man. There are all sorts of people in this world. My date returns and we head out. In my car, she pulls out a cigarette and lights up. Doesn't even bother putting the window down. We should go shooting out at my dad's farm. What's your favorite fun? I vaguely excuse myself from such activities and point out that it is rather later and time to go home. I drop her off at her house and she says, "This was great, except for that crap waiter. We should totally go get that Big Mac next time. See you soon." I flee. This is hands down the worst date, not only that I've had, but any of my friends have even heard about. When it got bad, that was only the prequel to what was to come. 2003, I'm at home and get a random phone call. I didn't own a cell, let's call her Melissa, is on the other end. She says she got my number from a mutual friend who thought that I would like her. Okay, this an odd phone call, but I'm really single, and a prospect of going on a date sounded delightful. We talk for more than an hour. She is sprinkling hints as to what she looks like. She also says she has seen pictures of me and thinks I'm cute. Bonus. She mentions her bra size more than once. Okay, sweet, I like a bigger chested girl, I'm thinking. We line up a date for the next Saturday. It was Thursday. I live in town and she lives in a suburb that requires her to catch a train and then a bus, roughly a 2-hour ride to see me. I have no idea what she looks like, except that she has big boobs and brown hair. I'm standing in the spot where we decided to meet, and I'm seeing a girl kind of stumbling down the street. She's wearing those baggy type jeans that goth kids wear, really baggy and frayed at the cuffs. Not my style at all. Also, she's got way too much makeup on. It's her, it's Melissa, my date. The reason she was stumbling is because she got a bit nervous at the idea of a blind date, so she picked up a Mickey for the train ride into town, then another for the bus ride, and I'm meeting 2 Mickeys deep and clearly drunk. The second she sees me, her haze-off drunk rises a notch to excitement, and she drapes herself across me in a sloppy hug with a butt grab added at the end. I'm confused and scared and nervous, and a bit frustrated all at once. I had planned to take her to play pool at an upscale place downtown that's kind of trendy. I mention it, and she's all for it as long as they serve alcohol. I'm okay. At the pool hall, the waitress gets us a table and asks us if we would like a drink. 4 shots of tequila and a pint of beer. She says, "Wow, okay, tequila? I'm not usually a fan, but okay." I say, "Oh, did you want some tequila too?" She replies. They were all for her. Keep in mind it was probably around 3 in the afternoon. The shits come, and one after another without a pause goes down Melissa's throat. 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot, 4, and then downs the beer. Upon finishing the beer, she looks right into my eyes and wipes the foam from her lips with the back of her hand. My mind pictured what a drunk rapist looks like moments before committing a rape. She saunters over to me while I trying to line up a shot and not notice how drunk she's getting. She leans over me while I'm bent over and says, "You can take me. We can go to the bathroom right now if you want." I miss my shot partially due to the hand creeping its way to my crotch. I kind of laugh her off and say maybe we should wait until we finish the game. She lets out this impatient sigh and grabs my cue to make her shot. She isn't really lining it up, and then she takes a hit. It barely even grazed the cue ball. In frustration, Melissa throws the pool cue across the pool table, whereupon hitting the carpet snags it and creates a massive tear across the table. This is hilarious to her, and she starts laughing like an idiot hyena. I'm less than amused. I say I need to take a leak and head to the bathroom. I'm keeping an eye on my back as I do in the case she's tailing me. In the bathroom, I lock myself into a stall and put my face in my hands. How did I get here? Who is the woman, and why did I agree to this? How can I get out this? Where is my God, and why has he forsaken me? JK, I'm not religious. While I'm in the bathroom contemplating my poor life decisions, I'm hearing a commotion outside. Some sort of shouting and a glass breaking. I compose myself as best I can and leave my sanctuary. Melissa and the bartender are face to face yelling at each other. The bartender and also a friend is being rational and asking her not to pull at the tear created by her pool cue lancing. Apparently, she thought the hilarity would continue if she ripped more carpet off the table, while the waitress and bartender thought better. Melissa sees me and starts explaining how much these two are idiots. I try calming her and tell her maybe we should hit up another place anyway. She complies, thank God. I'm an opportunist, so I try to make the best of this situation. I'm mentally crossing off the date stuff I can do with this girl in her inebriated state, and come to conclusion it would be best to just get drunk and pass the time until her scheduled bus leaves. She's all for it, surprise, surprise. I grab a case of beer, and being a sunny day I suggest a beach not far from the train station. I've stated more than once now that she should be on her way when the bus gets here. I didn't want her to have to be stranded in town if she did, I say. She's reluctantly agrees. We pass the next few hours drinking on the beach, and her trying her best to paw at my crotch. By about 6:30 or so I'm fairly buzzed and not far from ending this odd scenario. It's about time to head to the bus station. She's moving at half speed now, and hinting that she doesn't want to leave yet. I'm not paying attention, but instead taking her by elbow and inching toward her bus. She doesn't have any more money. I pay for the ticket. The bus driver takes her ticket, but she doesn't get on. Instead, she looks over her shoulder at me, and then proceeds to empty her stomach right on the first step of the bus. The bus driver pushes her back, curses her out, closes the door, and peels off. Oh God, no. Wiping her mouth of leftover vomit, she gives me a faint smile and says, well, looks like we can hang out a little longer. I'm not amused, I'm not trying to hide it either. I'm not smiling, I'm not being polite, I'm a totem of disappointment. I'm walking away from the train station with her in tow. She explains that she has nowhere to go, and it really isn't a big deal if she just goes home with me. And besides, we can have some fun while we're at it. No. I let the steam of anger simmer down a bit and think logically, mistake. She really doesn't have anywhere to go, and it would be a dick move to just leave her to her own devices. Reluctantly, I tell her she crash at my place, but it's going to be on my couch. She's all for it. I live with my cousin at the time, and he's home. He sees this atrocity come in behind me and runs to his bedroom, stifling the laughs along the way. Fuck you, cuz. We watch a bit of TV while finishing the last of the beer in my fridge. I tell her it's getting late, and I'm going to call it a night. I grab some extra blankets and pillows for her. She takes them quietly and thanks me. It's the middle of the night. I'm awakened by a sensation in being crushed. Melissa is on top of me. On top, my blankets fully clothed, and our faces are inches apart. I couldn't sleep, is all she says. I tell her to get off of me, and that she's hurting me. She gets up. She says she didn't want to sleep in my living room, and asks if she can sleep in here with me. Wordless, I get up, grab the blankets and pillow from the living room, and make a bed next to mine. She watches me do this, and when I finish, instead saying anything, I point to the bed and climb back into my own. Once more that night, she attempted to get on top of me. Also, she never took her shoes off. The heavens smile upon me by blessing me with daybreak. I wake her up and repeat the process of taking her to the bus station. This time the formalities are gone. There's your bus, don't puke this time. No, I didn't have a good time, but goodbye anyway. On returning home, I pull out my black book and look up our mutual friend, and proceed to rag her out for putting me through such an ordeal. My friend is perplexed and has no idea who Melissa is. I describe her, and there's a moment of silence. She says she remembers now, it makes sense, she says. My friend had her friend from out of town come to visit, but she had brought along her cousin, who was high-functioning, but a special needs student. Her mother was in the process having her signed over to a group home here in town. When Melissa visited my friend, she apparently went through her things and found a photo of me with her with my phone number on the back and took it. I went on a date with a mentally disabled woman. First date with my ex. He picked me up at home. We drive 1 block to his friend's house, where he walked straight to the backyard and started yelling, "Tony." No answer. He gets mad. We leave. He never told me what our date would consist of, so as we're driving, I'm looking around and had no idea where we were going. He finally pulls up to the bowling alley in our town. He said he took the back way because he wanted to surprise me. I honk he just got lost. Game 1 commences. I win. He says he let me win because he wanted to be nice. Game 2 I win. Game 3 rolls around, and he's mad because I'm kicking his ass. He was trying his damnedest to beat me. It was quite funny as he was sweating and cursing up a storm with every gutter ball. I asked him if he wanted bumpers as a joke. He just ignored me and sat down across from. I win Game 3. Then I mentioned to him that I used to be on a bowling league and am very kick-ass. We leave after Game 3. We go get Chinese food. We eat, have a conversation. Typical date stuff. He goes up to the counter to ask for a refill on his drink. Cashier asks for the 15 cents refill charge as stated on posted sign on the cash register. He flips out and walks away and tells me we're leaving. I hadn't even finished my food. He drives me back to his friend's house and goes back to the back and continues to yell, "Tony." He gets no answer again. He then tell me they were playing video games and he wanted to finish the game earlier, but since Tony wasn't there, he tried again after our date. With nothing left to do, he drives me the 1 block back home. Needless to say, we dated for a year and a half after that. Things ended after a bad Valentine's Day date. Edit, Tony, I already knew him. My ex, Tony, and I were all on yearbook staff together. Valentine's Day date for those asking, it's long. I got off of an 8-hour shift at work. I was a waitress and on my feet all day. On the way home, he texted me to hurry up and get ready. I just wanted to relax a bit, shower and rest my feet. After I told him I would be ready around 9, he said I needed to be ready earlier. There was never any mention of any reservations to me, so I didn't know why he needed me to be ready before 9. Anyway, he picked me up and we started driving, and it was completely silent. I didn't say anything until we parked in front of BJ's. It was crowded and I said, "Looks busy, we're not going to get a table." He replied, "I had a reservation but you weren't ready on time." A fight started because he was mad that we didn't make it to our reservation. I was mad because I was never told of a reservation, and I would more than likely be paying for dinner, because I was the only one who had a job. His parents never gave him money because they didn't like me. At one point he started punching his steering wheel, and I noped the fuck out of his car and ran to a closed-down furniture store. I called a co-worker, and when my ex ran after me, I told him to stay away from me, and that he would never see me again. My co-worker left his date and came to pick me up. The next day I went to pick up my shit, and from the ex's house. Okay, I saw him once more, but it was to pick up my shit. I gave him back his promise ring, and he actually said, "Hopefully the next girl will appreciate it more." I told him it wasn't smart to give that ring to the next girl. He texted me later while I was at work, and he said, "Give me some time, and then we can be friends." I never texted him back, and haven't spoken to him since. Yes, the co-worker had feeling for me, and yes, we eventually began dating. He wasn't a rebound. We're still together 5 years later, and getting married next year. So what if I don't know what needless means? Seemed right at the time I was typing this. Here is a summary. I had met this guy this summer, and we hit it off really well. He made me crab cakes. I'm from Maryland, so that is always great in my book. And we watched the fireflies in the forest behind his house, under the stars. We both agreed we had really enjoyed ourselves. We hooked up, that was great too. We decided to go get McFlurries from McDonald's, and I thought, I don't need any shoes. Now keep in mind I'm 5'6" 120 pounds, blonde hair. 19, so we hop in the car. His car is low and has tinted windows, so it looked sketch. We got ice cream and we were driving back, and he gets pulled over for not turning on his left turn signal at a left green arrow. The cop asks me my name, and he goes back to his car. 15 minutes pass, and we're both freaking out. Then another cop car pulls up. Rewind, I lost my wallet during the school year, and it was given to a cop. Unfortunately, there was a false ID in there, so I was called and had to go get it. But they didn't say I was being charged, so they took my ID and I left. I get a call about a month later, and the cop says, "You need to come into the station to sign papers," and I asked, "Can you explain to me what's happening?" He said, "You just need to fill out some paperwork. Those who listen are better off than those who don't," and hung up. So I was thinking, was that a threat or no? I called my dad and he talked to my uncle who was a cop, and they told me not to go in. Apparently, it was a summons I had to sign. And since I didn't go in, it turned into a warrant for my arrest. Unfortunately, I had no idea because they were sending all the papers to my mailbox at my dorm at school, which is not where I live in the summer. So fast forward. The cop comes back to the car and says, "Ma'am, did you know there is a warrant out for your arrest?" I had no idea. Fortunately, the kid I was with knew about everything previously. We waited for the cop to call the police, which was 3 hours away, and he told me he wasn't sure if they were going to have to come get me, or if I could be detained in the county I was in. So we waited, and waited, and waited. Finally, he comes around and says I have to be detained there. A female cop comes to my side and asks me to get out. Ironically, I'm in a black and white striped dress, also with no shoes. They handcuffed me and put me in the cop car. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't wipe the tears off my face. I got to the jail with no idea of what was going to happen. They searched me, asked me questions, and put shackles on my ankles. I had no shoes on, and my toes kept getting caught in the chains. Then they put me in a cell. I sat. They took my picture, my prints and all. They also laughed because it was a first date. -3:30 rolls around, and finally they let me go out and sign papers. They take those fucking shackles off my ankles, and I call the kid. Thankfully, I wrote his number on my hand before they took me away. He was right in the front with my shoes, my mom and my sister. His dad bought me coffee in the morning and a muffin, then have me a high five. I'll tell it from the bad date side. We had never been on a date, and she barely knew me. It was our first date and certain to be our last. I picked her up and immediately commented on her appearance. How gorgeous she looks, blah blah blah. She was not a woman to be objectified, however sexy she may have been, and within minutes I was on strike one. I took her to my friend's house. It was Christmas break, so he presented me with a bottle of Jack Daniels, and I rolled us a few joints. Nothing too weird yet. Nothing she hasn't seen. Well, I opened the bottle, and we do a couple of shots. Just then, he pulled out this antique Soviet sniper rifle, and we began taking it apart and talking about how badass the hammer and sickle looks on the iron sights. It was a Mosin, and what kind of killing you could do with it from over 2 miles away. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed my date was frozen. She was rigid with fear. Then, my buddy pulls out his brand new top-of-the-line USP, military-grade handgun, and shows me its dank sliding action. I'm blatantly aware by now of how bad this looks, but we'd crossed the point of no return, and there was nothing left to do now but embrace it. Besides, the guns were admittedly very cool. Surely she knew that. We are otherwise nerdy gamers, or else we wouldn't even know these guns exist. So we didn't for a moment consider how white trash, redneckish, and sketch we must seem to outsiders. Hey, I know how you love drug abuse, so I bought you a bottle of whiskey. By the way, check out my growing arsenal. I think an AK-47 also came out. Well, allow me to carry out this white trash behavior to its bitter end. While drinking and driving away from my friend's house, the girl wants desperately to be dropped off back at her car. This is illegal in so many ways, and I've even offered her alcohol from the driver's seat. She was 18, and this is America. Land of the free, not so much. Not like this. At the Burger King drive-thru, I decide I'm feeling overly emotional about my mother's recent death, and I'm overcome by the sudden realization that every relationship I've chased was a diversion from layers of grief beginning at early childhood. You tend to think more candidly about your problems when you're in the company of someone who makes you want to be better. That, combined with the obvious failure of this evening, and my unwillingness to be anything other than a wild-eyed extension of my ID before this girl, on whom I made a horrible, lasting impression, is all too much. The jig was up. I dropped the whole effort and admitted the only thing I wanted from her ever again was a hug. And if I could just have that, I will write the whole thing off. Surprisingly, she obliged, and we hugged for a solid minute. Fuck, I needed that, I thought. And I thanked her. She said, "You're welcome." I then became profoundly depressed, no doubt exacerbated by the alcohol and marijuana. But I was honest and I was myself, and I didn't care that she hated me. It was better to have that than for her to like anyone else I could only pretend to be. She sped away in her Saturn, and her friend said I scared her half to death, and to just forget about it. I wouldn't see her again for another 2 years, when we met at a coffee shop. I was in college by then, cleaned up my act, got dressed, and headed in a new direction. Again, I made no effort to impress her, but somehow I did. We've been together for 2.5 years, and she understands me better than anyone else in this world. And she loves me. The real me. What a horrible date, though. It's her favorite story to tell. Alright, Reddit, let's talk about Lily. Lily was one of my half a dozen or so OkCupid hookups this year. Now, I'll preface by saying that I don't take OkCupid very seriously anymore at all. I made a second account while I was recovering from knee surgery, and have used it on and off ever since depending upon how bored I am. One night, I get a few profile views and an unexpected message, Lily. She lived about an hour away, and we got to talking about nothing in particular. She was trying to impress me with decent grammar. I type pretty well for a guy on OkCupid, apparently, and I was fairly bored with her personality. We weren't a high match percentage to begin with, and she just seemed to be throwing herself at me too easily. These apps and websites have put a lot of women on such a pedestal that when they make it too easy, it's kind of a red flag. We exchanged actual numbers, although I'm not exactly sure why I bothered. I guess I was feeling particularly desperate. At any rate, 5 minutes into texting, she just starts unloading naked pictures at me. They were obviously previously saved on her phone, and I was not attracted to her at all. She had the body of a woman who looked twice her age and not well taken care of at all. She was 25. The conversation faded out, and we only spoke once or twice in the coming weeks, and not for very long. At one point, she even told me she wasn't interested because she didn't like men in uniform, and to stop talking to her. I did, but she messaged me again anyway. Then, my friends, it happens. I am laying in bed around 2 o'clock in the morning, and my phone buzzes. I sleepily roll over and check the message. Hey, what are you doing? We exchange early morning pleasantries where I explain that I'm sleeping regardless of her being bored. As it were, Lily was a stripper, and that was likely her stage name. I was just now learning these facts. She was asking if she could drive the hour to my house and sleep with me. I was hesitant at first, but in a moment of weakness I agreed to let it happen. She shows up nearly 3 hours later in a pair of stripper heels and a very unattractive dress that smelled of broken dreams and body odor. She explains that she got pulled over on her way to my house, and proceeds to explain that the police continually harass her for no reason. She was also a good 3 inches taller than she had indicated, too. I was already not feeling this entire encounter when she strolled into my house and demanded I give her a beer. She starts dumping a Bud Light down her throat and essentially says, "Let's get to it." We go upstairs where she lays on my bed and begins criticizing me for just assuming we were going to hook up. Wait, what the fuck? She mocks my choice of interior decorations and scoffs at my scanner when it went off for a traffic stop, noting about her disdain for local law enforcement once more. She then tells me about how she failed out of USMC boot camp, has a child and a baby daddy, sugar daddy, lives off of her mentally ill father, and works as a stripper for fun. I take a chance to shut her up, lean in, and I kiss her. She sets the beer down and seems to enjoy this awkward yet alright kiss. This begins the single worst makeout session of my entire life. I didn't think it was humanely possible to be such a horrible kisser, but by God, it certainly is. She is literally sucking on my mouth like some sort of suction cup and pulling on my hair. She undoes my trousers, and I thank the heavens above I'll at least get something out of this horrible experience. Yeah, wrong. Although she does go down on me, her fellatio is just as bad as her kissing. She is ramming my poor junk into the back of her throat and grinding her teeth around my shaft. I am squirming and begging her to stop. Pretty sure she was strangely into that. After several painful minutes, she slips off her underwear and says, "My turn, bitch." I can't make this stuff up. Swallowing, I think to myself, Hollywood Jones, old boy, you've come this far. You may as well ride the train until the end of the line. I go down on this girl, and it is awful. It is awful because she smells and has the single most abnormal clitoris I have ever dealt with. It reminded me of silly putty. I don't know how, but it just did. She criticizes every motion of my tongue to the point where it becomes irritating, all the while she is pulling on my hair and smacking my head like a bongo drum. She lifts her right leg up a little and proceeds to fucking fart in my face. She literally rips a fart into my face and starts laughing about it. I am absolutely mortified, and finally, she pushes my head off and yells, "Are you going to fuck me or what?" I proceed to start going at it, where she refuses to sit still for more than several seconds at a time. Every time we engage in one position, she is flipping herself into some awkward pretzel to do something else. She starts complaining about my bad leg, military injury, and how I can't do several things she likes. She finally declares, "I'll just fuck you myself." I lay on my back as she hovers over me, and then lets out an audible queef, on purpose, I swear to God, and it sprays me with vaginal fluid. I can't contain my distaste for what she's just done as she slides down, still queefing, on top of me. After about a minute of that she declares, "Okay, I'm all set," and hops off me of. She starts to get dressed in a hurry and says adios, quite sharply as she stomps down my stairs. I am laying there naked and confused, but proceed to follow her downstairs to lock the door after her. She is still putting her shoes on and says to me, "Nice meeting you and all, but don't ever text me again." At this point I just laugh, and she slams my own door in my face. She texted me about a half hour later to tell me what a great guy I am and to take care. I never replied and deleted her number. I don't know if I would consider any of this a date, but this seems like the best place to post it. I have only started dating in past year or so, but I already have plenty stories to tell. This is on the first date with my ex. I meet him while going to work one day, and his second time asking me out. I accepted and we planned to go to the movies. We meet at the theaters but missed our showtime, so we get tickets for the next showing. I bought my own ticket and he bought his own, no big deal. He then stated that he was hungry and asked if I was hungry as well. I told him I was and we went to the mall to eat. We get in line and he orders his meal and then turns to me and says that he couldn't afford to buy me anything. I wasn't upset that he didn't pay for my things. I was more upset that he admitted that he could barely afford to go on a date. I mean, why suggest the movies if you couldn't afford the price? Slightly put off, but I didn't end it like I should have done. He eats his meal, and we walk out where he proceeds to smoke until our movie began. Walked into the theater and sat down away from other people. About halfway through, he starts kissing me, and I realized that he didn't take anything for his breath. My mind was seriously preoccupied about his breath, rather than the fact that it was my first kiss. A little more into the movie, he starts to get handsy. His hands went from my shoulder to trying down my shirt to play with my boob. I asked him to stop, which he did, but decided that I'll probably say yes 5 minutes later. We made out until the end of the movie while keeping his hands away from my chest. You would have thought that I was smart enough to dump him, right? Wrong. I proceeded to date this loser and creep for a long time due to my self-esteem issues. Took a while to realize I deserved better than him, and I broke it off with him. I cringe at the fact that he was my first everything. So this date was the first and last with this guy I met from OkCupid. I talked to him and seemed genuine and nice, so we exchanged numbers. We texted for a bit and decided to meet each other after a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I was working and going to school at the same time, so my schedule was filled. I managed to get out of work early one day, but he had to change the time of our meeting. So he convinced me to meet him right after work and in my uniform. I was horrified and nervous, but decided to go with it. I meet him for an early dinner, which he paid for, and talked while we were eating. I finished, and he decided to tell me he wanted to kiss me. Instead of waiting to chew on some gum I had, he kisses me right after we ate. Once again, that was all I could think of. We walk around where he decided to show his pervy side off. Goes for a couple of butt and boob grabs as well as pushing me to the walls to kiss me. I decided to sit him to tell him that I wasn't feeling it, but I didn't get a chance to. He bought me ice cream, and then told me that my shyness was making him feel sexually aggressive. Then asked when was the last time I had sex, and wondered if I could have sex with him, because it has been 9 months for him. Ended the date and walked away. I have some more, but I think these two were the worst of all my dates. It was an OkCupid date. Bit of backstory first. It had been 4 years since I broke up with my ex for cheating and lying, and then accusing me of not trusting her. As if you gave me any reason to, you fuck. In those 4 years, I had been on a lot of dates with a lot of different women. All of them ended in rejection. Half of them were because I screwed it up, the other half were because she was either legitimately not interested, which is fine, or she was a bitch. I figure around 25% of people are bitches/assholes, so this works out okay. So I was lonely as fuck, a bit mopey, and quite sensitive, which I think is understandable given the situation. So back to the date. This girl messaged me on OkCupid, let's call her asshole, and she's not 100% my type, but I'm a sucker for the girl taking the lead, so I went with it. She suggests we meet up in the city for ice cream and a comedy show, and I accept. I arrived at the ice cream place where we were to meet, and waited for 5 minutes. She showed up, came in, sat down, and everything went quite smoothly for the first half of the date. Conversation flowed. She was more attractive in person than in her picture. Great. We went to the comedy show to find it was sold out, and they turned us away. Whatever, she said we could go for a walk around town instead, fine. During that walk, she went from interested and participating in the conversation to cold and distant. When I stopped walking briefly to look at something, she kept going, and didn't even turn to look at me. She gave me one-word answers if she even replied at all, and when I happened to brush up against her arm, she visibly shied away. I got fucking tired of this quickly. I just flat out asked her, "Are you having a bad time?" Her reply made me want to burn things with a flamethrower. To be honest, I go on these dates a few times a week just for fun, maybe a free meal, and a good story to tell my girlfriends. I'm not looking for anything. At least not from you. On paper you're nice and all, but in person there's just nothing about you. You won't even make a good story. Instead of doing what any sane person would do, ditching her right there and going home to masturbate, I walked her to her car while seething internally. Asshole made me feel like an absolute worthless piece of shit, and it took a while and a fair amount of talking with my close friends to come back from that. But as chance would have it, a month later I ended up meeting an amazing girl who, when I told her this story, offered to help me exact vengeance on Asshole. I turned it down, but I've been dating Amazing Girl for almost a year, and every so often she still offers. Once upon a time I worked at GameStop, and this dude asked me out on a date while I was working. I'd never been on a date with someone I'd just met, so I figured why not, and said yes. Here's how it went. When he came to pick me up, he sat outside of my house and honked his horn until I came outside. I asked him what he wanted to do, dinner, a movie, etc. His reply was, "I don't really have any money, so I was thinking that we could just go for ice cream." Kind of a curveball, but I went with it. The whole way to the ice cream place he talks about nothing but getting wasted with his buddies. Oh, good. We get there and are standing in line, and I mention that I'm planning to move to Ontario, neighboring province. And he replies with, "Oh, I lived in Toronto for a while, but I lived in a neighborhood with a lot of niggers in it, so obviously it was super unsafe. So I moved back. We're both Caucasian." I realize that there's a nice black couple in line behind us who obviously overheard this moron and are offended. Great, now I'm an asshole by association. We finally get to the front of the line, and I place my order first. $2.50 hot fudge sundae. I turn and wait for him to order, and he looks at me and goes, "Well, aren't you going to pay for your ice cream?" The cheap fucker. By this point I'm thinking exit strategies, but the bus stop is a far walk, and I just used my change buying myself an ice cream, so I figure I'll just wait it out. We eat our ice cream in relative silence, and I give the old, "Oh, I just got a text from my friend, I need to go." So we leave, thankfully. He drives me home, and as I'm about to get out of the car, he leans in to kiss me. This is not happening, so I get out of the car and say no thanks. He honks the horn at me as I walk from the car to my house. This dude even had the gall to show up with his buddies at my work a few days later to try and chew me out for being a bitch on our date, which seemed to make him feel better until I started describing the date in front of his friends, at which point he retreated to the entrance of the store to glare at me until I threatened to have mall security escort him out. Awesome. So, I get an itch for some delicious sashimi from my favorite restaurant in town, and I drive on over. "Table for one, please." The cute hostess seats me and kind of gives me the eye. I brush it off and pay no mind. I start answering some work emails on my phone as my meal arrives, and I continue to reply to these shits and eat my food in peace. "Hello, can I sit with you?" I'm on break. It's the cute hostess. I put my phone down and tell her she's more than welcome. We enjoy some small talk, and she asks me to hang out. I figured I'd go for it since she's kinda cute, but a little invasive. Whatever. So that night, it's 10 p.m., and she calls me and asks me to go out with her and her friends. I say no, but she insists and she offers to pick me up. My truck was in the shop, so I figured that was pretty nice of her. Little did I know she was doing it to give me no way out of her crazy trap. We hit up this huge dance club, which is something I never do because it's way out of my comfort range. She introduces me to like 10 of her friends. All of them giggle and smile, and I hear one say, "He looks like he could be the one." What the fuck? Do I look like Keanu? Whatever. I order a beer and ask her if she wants a drink. She's like, "Oh, I'll get my own," and orders 5 shots of Sky vodka and drinks them all in succession. So here I am, with this girl whose friends think I'm going to marry, and she's fucking shit-can hammered. Great. "Hey, this place is a little intense for me. We should split." She's like, "I'll BRB," and comes back with 2 shots of Jameson. I take them because fuck it. I'm stuck now, and if something happens I'd like to use, I was drunk as an excuse. Last call comes around, and we're walking out the door. She insists on driving, and it's like a 5-minute ride back to our neighborhood. So I figure I'd like to live dangerously for one evening and hop in the passenger side. I'm drunk enough, and I want the night to be over. Fuck it. She takes me to her fucking parents' house instead of her apartment. It's 20 minutes from my house. No chance in walking home now. Sad face. We walk in and she's like, "Do you want some wine?" "I want some wine." I'm gonna get us some wine from the wine cellar. Little did I know, her parents own the restaurant in which this tale began. She comes back up from downstairs with this bottle of wine. God knows what kind it was. I'm not sure if it was $6 or $600. I didn't care anymore. I can't find a corkscrew. And she hammers the glass on the edge of the countertop and makes a smooth break. I was pretty impressed, but still kind of worried about my fate. Oh shit, I gotta let my dogs out. She opens the cages and lets these dogs just shit on the floor and says to me, "Pretend like you didn't see that. Let's go up to my room. I want to show you something. Do you want some Coke?" "No thanks, but I'll come with you." At this point, I was ready to bang her or hang myself, as there was no way out of this predicament. We head upstairs and she breaks out a mirror and cuts up a few lines. "I want to read you something." She starts reading me journal entries and the shittiest poetry I've ever heard as she does lines and drinks wine. These are journal entries from when I was in rehab. I used to do a lot of coke. I went through a really rough time with my ex-husband when we lived in Italy. I didn't know it, but he was gay. I tried everything I could to make him straight again, or even be attracted to me more. I even let him fuck me in the ass. Something along those lines. So here I am, in this chick's parents' house at 5 in the morning, drunk and listening to her terrify me with her life story the first time we met. She puts her journal, the cocaine, and the glass of wine. It was more of a cup like you would use for your morning glass of milk or whatever, down and asks me if she can try something. Whatever, go ahead. I'm frustrated, drunk, tired, annoyed, and this girl won't shut the hell up. She climbs on top of me and starts gyrating on my man parts and playing with herself. I'm thinking, this is a really unorthodox way of trying to get someone to fuck you, but whatever. So I go with it. Like a minute later, she gets off of me and grabs my dick and says, "You're hard. I thought I was kind of scaring you, but I see that I'm turning you on. But I don't want to have sex with you. It's our first date." I tell her I'm tired and I have underscore 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 to do the next day. I just want to sleep. So I make a weird barrier of blankets between us and pass out. The next day she drives me home and asks if I would like to hang out again. Sure, I said as sarcastically as possible, thinking me might get the hint, and I just the door and walk to my apartment. That night she calls me again and asks me if I want to go see Lady Gaga. I've always wanted to see a Lady Gaga show, but I had to bail for the sake of my own sanity. Row 4. RIP. I joined website for dating to try and get more dates. That was my only intent. I've been working too much for 2 years at my new job. I just wanted to have more fun. I got an email and set up a date with this girl. It's my 5th date from the site. It's been fun. But this one girl was like one of those love at first sight moments when we met at a restaurant. I saw HH and she was perfect. I tried to play it cool, but I felt like I could just cut ties with all the girls I've dated and just commit to her. Physically, she was everything I could ever ask for and exactly my type. Her personality seemed about a 10 out of 10. About 30 minutes into sitting down, we didn't even order cause we were just talking. The chemistry was as good as it was with my first love when I was 13. It was perfect, sparks were flying. I thought I was done and ready to commit here. But then she tells me to forget about ordering food. Let's go somewhere else, and she has this idea. She won't say much, and I like surprises, so I didn't ask much. We jumped in my car and drove to this restaurant about 20 minutes away, kind of out of town. It was halfway up a mountain near a ski resort. I'm familiar with the area, so no big deal. We walk in, and her family is celebrating her aunt's birthday. There was only family and a lot of it, about 40 people. She introduces me, and everybody was happy to meet me, and real nice. Everybody also knew that she was out on a first date. They were asking her stuff like, "Is this the guy? Is this your date? Is this the one?" All of a sudden I wasn't so cool and relaxed. I felt heavy pressure to be on my best behavior. It was high pressure to the 3rd degree. But everybody was nice, so that helped. We sat down and I started being questioned by her older sister, her aunt, and another lady that I forget her relation to my date. The mom started kind of defending me and telling them to back off and let me eat. But the interrogating continued. After I don't know how long, they turned to my date and jokingly said, "We approve." Then I was able to kind of get my bearings about me for a minute. I was totally off balance all night, just tense. I was afraid the back of my shirt would get that a big wet spot because I felt sweat on my back. So the sister brings her cute little girl and lets me hold her, and she and my date started taking pictures of me holding her, and somebody else's baby boy as well. I started to feel like the tone of it all was that we were a couple. I kind of felt like I was married to her, and these nice people were my in-laws. After a couple of hours, probably closer to 3 hours, everybody was kind of tiring out and everything began to wind down. Keep in mind her car is still at the other restaurant down the hill. Then her dad suddenly asks me jokingly what my intentions are with his daughter, though I can't remember how he phrased the question. Everybody looked at the table, looked at me, which is about half the people there. I guess I was exhausted from all the questioning. I was questioned by multiple people multiple times, and the pressure of it all because I kind of lost it. He asked the question, I looked across the table at her, and she told her dad to stop it. Her dad smiles and jokingly says that he'd really like to hear my response, and her uncle, I think, also said he'd like to know jokingly. I looked at my date and said, "Can I talk to you alone for a minute?" To which her dad laughs loudly and then says I made him nervous. So everybody is laughing now, and I guess it was a big joke. Then I said to my date, "Hey, can I talk to you alone for a minute?" I stood up in place, it was one of those long bench seats, and I couldn't push it back cause other people were sitting on it. Then her sister, I think, says, "Oh, there are no secrets in this family, speak your mind." People then laugh again, and everybody starts making jokes about not having secrets, and this man who married into the family somehow tells me that he remembers being in my place, and he says, "Let me give you some advice. The best thing to do right now is speak your mind and be honest." Then others join in and echo his sentiment, all jokingly, I think. So I looked at my date and she says something like, "You can tell me anything here, we're all family." She also, I think, was joking, but I had started to lose my ability to tell when people were joking and when they were serious. So the dad says, "Wait, I haven't gotten an answer to my question." So finally I speak directly to the dad and say, "I'd like to discuss that with her first." But I regretfully laughed as I said it. So her dad says, "I asked you first, I want to know." I turn to my date and she says something like, "Go ahead, you can tell me. I'm a big girl, I can handle it." So I said okay, and sat down, then took a couple of breaths while her dad kind of quieted everybody down. I started with, "I think I made a huge mistake." It all spiraled down from there. I said harsh things like that I felt like I was having a bad dream where I was suddenly married. I questioned her intentions in bringing me there. I said stuff like, "What were you thinking? Yes, I liked you, but I just met you, and right now I know your aunt." I pointed at her sitting next to me. "Better than I know you." I think she was humiliated, but I couldn't stop. The more I spoke, the more bad stuff came out. Total fucking tailspin. I said I want to find someone special, but I don't want to skip the first 29 dates and skip to date 30, which is what I'd done that night. Then people started interrupting and chiming in and suggesting that she and I slow down and have a real first date. I wasn't having it. I was out of control. I said, "No, it's too late for that. I feel robbed here. I wanted to meet this girl, get to know her, date her, and maybe fall for her. But now it's like we're engaged and her whole family is here, and there are all these expectations. We skipped the getting to know each other and dating part, so I feel robbed." Then I said yet another thing I regret. I said it's a huge red flag, with an emphatic gesture, that I asked for a minute alone with you to talk, and this is what I got instead. I added something like, "You're all great and a great family, but the lack of certain boundaries is a huge red flag for me. I would never let my relationship become family business." My date interrupts me at this point and says, "Okay, so let's talk in private. Let's go outside and talk. I'm sorry I didn't give you that minute. Let's go outside and talk privately. I'll give you all night." She was visibly shaken, and I could tell tears were inevitable. I stood up again, and realizing that I had insulted all of them, I just quietly walked out. I felt really bad cause they were all nice and had nothing but the best intentions for me. They love her, and they were literally telling me that I was good enough, which should have been a compliment, but I somehow took it the wrong way and spat in their face. I didn't even drink. Junior prom. A few weeks before prom, one of, if not the prettiest girls in the school, didn't have a date yet. I knew she'd fairly recently broken up with her boyfriend, so in all likelihood she was holding out. But regardless, that just means most other folks already had dates. It was a small school. One day I gathered up enough balls to ask if she'd like to go with me. We'd been casually talking in the hallways before school, but nothing crazy. I didn't for a minute think she liked me. Surprisingly, she said yes. Over the next few weeks I'd stop by and see her at work after school or on weekends. One day she was feeling particularly shitty and I, cheesily, had flowers delivered in an effort to cheer her up. Back then I lacked a lot of confidence, so I was quite good at being the nice guy for a girl while she pined over someone else. Anywho, to move the story along, we get to prom. It's catered. She doesn't talk much at the table, to me or anyone. The evening goes on, and things don't change much. Her mind is just elsewhere. Eventually the music cranks up. I'm not a huge fan of dancing, and I was feeling pretty defeated myself at this point. So I stepped out for a few minutes to gather my shit, and came back in right around the time the first slow song came on. We started dancing, and about midway through her complete, arrogant jackass of an ex walks up, cuts me out, tells me he's taking over. She proceeds to spend the whole evening with him, essentially, quite happily I might add. It was tradition at our school for groups to arrange a trip after prom as well, and we'd both decided to go to the same one, a theme park. But of course he did too. As you can imagine, nothing else changed over the next couple days. They sat together on the bus and basically spent the whole time up each other's ass, and she didn't speak to me the rest of the time. And just to add this to it, even though it's, for me, the least hurtful piece, I paid for everything. Her ticket, the photos, the trip. She paid for her dress, and that was about it. Once all was said and done, I realized that she really just wanted a way in. She was a sophomore and couldn't go unless she went with an upperclassman. I was a junior. Good enough. Which seems fitting. I've always been and felt good enough. It wasn't a date, but he'd convinced himself it was. Mutual commiseration over the two of us not getting to go on the company trip at a bar near the shop. Coincidentally, near his house too, so I parked there to avoid paid parking. Then he asked me to come inside to pre-game, and I got weird vibes. I'd turned him down twice before, and something about the scenario flicked a switch. I lied and said I'd rather have only one at the bar as I was going to drive home later. And he goes, "Oh, I've got sealed drinks in the fridge, and my roommates are home, don't worry." Bro, now I'm extra fucking worried. Edit. Because people have been asking, I'll explain my thought process and fear behind that particular situation. TLDR, don't, when completely unprompted, reassure someone of the reasons you can't/won't drug or rape them when they turn down an offer to pre-game. I'll admit to being a pretty paranoid person. I went to school to be a police officer and am an insufferable party mom. I don't drink booze out of open spirit bottles at an acquaintance's house. I also don't go into other people's homes without at least one other close friend with me. Both are rules born out of necessity, as I've been drugged at a party via a drink I watched poured. Never trust box wine. They cut open the bag and put it back inside the box, and never let out of my sight. I've also had to case a house to find a plastered friend who'd been swept away to someone's room. So again, I'll admit the odds were stacked against him on that one. The thing that first set me off was the offer to come inside. I'd already turned down his advances twice before, and he was proving himself to be disrespectful of my boundaries, and my straightly delivered no, as one commenter points out, he was super awkward, so I was willing to give friendship a chance. It's why I even considered going to the bar with him in the first place. I had no idea at the time anyone else was home, and it was too intimate an offer to be sure he'd be respectful of my space in his own home. The nail in the coffin was when told I just wanted one drink at the bar and then to head home. He responded with what was essentially, "Oh, well, don't worry, I'm not going to rape you or anything." He didn't know I was lying or super uncomfortable, and that just affirmed to me that, yeah, you can't take no for an answer, and I'm pretty sure you don't intend to leave after we go inside. Which proved correct based on his ensuing behavior. To answer this thread, I actually almost picked another thing he said to me. We were all on a bus heading to a meeting, and he sat next to me even though I told him no, and there were plenty of other seats. I stared out the window and ignored him the whole time. When we arrived, he asked me how my nap was. I said I wasn't sleeping, and he said, "No, I can tell when you're sleeping." Quit shortly after that, because my boss refused to separate us or do anything. Edit number 2, just to address a couple comments so they don't get lost in the thread. Before I turned him down the second time, I actually liked him a lot. The first time I was clear and said no, but let's just carry on as we were. The second rejection was a, dude, I already said no, this time listen because I mean it. He was attractive. Probably an 8 out of 10. I just wasn't interested like that. Sorry I didn't provide that context, but I didn't think it was an important detail. And I'm happy some of you think I'm overly paranoid. I'm glad you haven't had to prop yourself over a trash can because you can't stop puking and don't want to choke and die since you can't stay awake. All over one unfinished and tampered with drink. I'm glad you've never had to deck someone to keep them from sexually assaulting your friend and book it so you don't get arrested. I'm happy that's not something you've had to think about, because honestly it sucks to have to look at the world this way. Regardless of my degree and the knowledge it gave me, I don't have the luxury of assuming these things won't happen anymore, because they've happened to me directly. Regardless of what you may assume about my relationship with this person, his attractiveness, or my paranoia, no is a complete sentence. Reassurance is not needed, because I already said no. I don't know if this constitutes a horror story, but I did have one really weird date. Matched with this girl. We exchanged a few messages, and then she asked me to friend her on Facebook. I thought that was a bit weird, so I just ignored the message. Figured she'd forget about me. She's a woman on an online dating service, so she must get 50 messages a day, right? 3 days later, she messages me, or not. And I liked her spunk, so I figured, okay, why not? Friend her on FB, and messaged her later that night, and we ended up chatting for over hours. She was really cool, and we had tons in common, even weird idiosyncrasies. This was a week before Christmas. I was leaving on the 22nd for a week and a half, and she was leaving for a trip to Japan on Christmas, so we met up that Saturday. Had a fun time. She stayed over at my place, and the next day suggested we get together again that night. I was a bit taken aback that she wanted to hang out again already, but I said sure. Went to her place that night, had a nice time. The next day, before I left for work, she told me that I was the most genuine person she'd ever met, and had no flaws, which seemed a hasty pronouncement, but I figured, hey, she seems confident and I guess she just knows what she wants, and I'm it. She and I both work in tech, and she also said several times how she was finally glad to meet an engineer that wasn't social awkward or downright weird. When I leave for work, she says we should get together again that night. I was leaving early the next day, and I asked her if she really wanted to hang out again, and she said that yeah, we were both going away, and it would be nice to see each other before we left. So I said sure, come over. So she comes over again, I leave for my trip the next day, and we spend the next few days texting back and forth. I was pretty happy, she seemed awesome, but maybe a bit hasty. While I was in Denver, she invited me on a trip back home to meet her parents. We had met less than a week before, and that seemed a bit fast, but whatever, she was just excited, I suppose. She told me she missed me a few times, and sent me tons of photos of herself, totally curated. Stuff you could post to Facebook, just her out and about doing things with friends and whatnot. Anyway, Christmas Day she leaves for Japan. Spends the next week and a half there. She's texting me less, but still sending me messages and photos every day. She's a bit less flirtatious than she had been, but I figured she was busy on her trip, and probably a bit stressed out from travel. She seemed like the anxious type. The night before she came back, I had already returned from mine. She tells me how she's looking forward to seeing me when she gets back, and she got me a gift that is kind of quirky yet very you. Which, again, seemed a bit weird since she didn't know me that well, but I figured that was just her style. She gets back the Tuesday after New Year's and invites me over that night. We hang out a bit, but she was really tired and not feeling well, jet-lagged, so I left after a few hours. Didn't hear from her for 3 days, but prior to going to Japan, she had already made plans to do something that Saturday night. It was emo night at a local bar. She was really into emo, which maybe should have been the first clue. So I figured I'd just see her then. And things had been moving a bit fast, so I figured maybe she just wanted some space and to rest from her trip. Finally, 3 days after seeing her, that Friday, she messages me in the evening with a long message that says how she had no romantic feelings for me anymore, and how I had moved things along too fast by messaging her, sending her photos of my trip, and saying I missed her. Which sounds reasonable out of context, but keep in mind she had been messaging me constantly, and had sent me tons of photos, and had asked me to send her photos of my trip. I hadn't for the first few days I was on my trip, and she told me she missed me several times. So her accusation was a bit confusing. The message continued into a second paragraph, saying that we had a lot in common but were very different people, and wanted different things from a relationship, which of course, we had not discussed what we were precisely looking for. Then it rambled a bit about how she needed space and was going to spend the next few weeks catching up on work and helping her friend find a new job, which seemed a bit odd, too, detailing her upcoming life plans in a breakup note, but whatever. And then it ended with how I am a very nice and caring person and can find someone who is a better match, yada yada yada. Then she disappeared. Haven't heard from her since. Strangely, she and I are still friends on Facebook, and she still follows me on Instagram. I stopped following her shortly after she broke up with me, but hasn't interacted with me at all.